about scrolling through, you have the paradox of choice. You know psychologically that there's just another option one swipe away.
Welcome back to the Social Media Sobriety Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Raimundo, and joined with me on Zoom is Rick Foote, the founder of Haven, a brand new way, very innovative, in the dating realm. So please, Rick, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your company.
Well, first off, thank you for having me, Tyler. As you mentioned, I am the founder of Haven. Haven is a new dating service. It sits somewhere in between a dating app and a matchmaker, if you really think about it. There is no actual physical app to download. There's nothing to swipe through, to search through. Our users complete a very detailed one-time survey that tells us who they are, what they're looking for. And we then use that to provide matches back to them. We deliver those matches once a week on what we call Match Monday. So you don't have to scroll and search and stay up to date. We'll notify you by text message and let you know. And we only deliver matches that are 80% or higher in compatibility.
And give me an idea of some of the survey questions that may be asking.
Yeah, we search. We do really look at multiple different dimensions. So we look at boundaries, preferences, relationship structure, all of that. Try to look at everything that we can to make the best possible match. Really similar to how a matchmaker would get structuring that. We go beyond surface things like you like long walks on the beach and things like that, or puppies. We look at sexual preferences. We look at behavioral preferences. We do have a big five psychology component in there as well. So if you're familiar with Ocean, that's in there as well. So there's a handful of things that go in to help be able to predict compatibility. And then the number one thing that we look at is intent, number one shared intent. Do you want the same things?
No, that's great. Now, I want to go back to something you said in the initial email. You reached out to me. I was very excited because I've been looking for a topic or someone to speak on this topic. You mentioned that most dating apps optimize for engagement and not outcomes. I'd love to know more about what you mean by that.
If you think about the business of a dating app, they're in the business of keeping you in the app, keeping you active. They measure things like time spent on app and things like that. At Haven, we took a different approach, all the way down to not even creating a physical mobile app. So all those metrics go out the window. So for us, what we're really looking at is trying to make sure that we can make quality connections and then move those to offline or real world as quickly as possible. And we have a number of ways that we try to do that.
So the goal really is to use the service and then immediately go out into the world and try to meet up and talk that way. Is really the most important in dating is not online. You really believe it's in person?
Correct. That's correct. Yeah. So, back to the survey component that I mentioned, our users complete that one-time survey, and then we told them to put their phone down, go live their life, and we'll let you know when it's time to pay attention to something. We don't want you scrolling through, continuing to look and search and make sure that things are going the way, going a certain way. We want you out there living your life. We go a little bit further and we work with local venues in each one of the markets that we operate in as well, providing third spaces or what we call meetup spots.
Mhm.
There's a whole lot that we do there as well for integration and real world interaction.
No, that's lovely, and I think it's really important to have that connection. If you couldn't tell, that's what this podcast is all about is
Right.
having that
Right.
that real connection. That's very, very important. I want to talk to you a little bit more on the social media side of things. When we see things like Instagram and TikTok, we see them as social media, but how does that influence our dating by scrolling through and seeing people that are showing their best lives and giving you unrealistic standards?
It's a great question. That's one of the things that we really wanted to architect around, because people do put on a performance. I like to call it sending a representative or an ambassador. That's really the best version of yourself, often, is what people try to portray. Part of what we do to solve for that is in that survey process, it's really difficult to lie or to misrepresent in consistent patterns. So the survey is designed to get to the root of people, what their intent is and what their desires are, to really get to know who they are beyond just the person or the persona that they want to present. And because we see that a lot. And then on the flip side, when you're thinking about scrolling through, you have the paradox of choice. You know psychologically that there's just another option one swipe away. So we tend to devalue the options that we have in front of us because there's another one right behind it that we can keep going through. So that's a real challenge for sure.
Now, another question that comes to mind too is, let's say I'm on the app and I match with somebody and I'm on
Mhm.
social media. Do you tell people to prevent from kind of stalking them beforehand? Because that's a very common thing nowadays. If you see someone on a dating app, you then look to their social media and try to find things about them before you actually meet them.
Yeah, we don't address that directly, although we do have engagement options that we try to encourage. So, for example, with messaging, we provide messaging prompts so conversations flow a little bit easier to try to help more interaction and less stalking and things like that. But we don't directly, I don't know that you can control somebody from not doing that, but we do try to influence that for sure.
And I'd love to know too more on your expertise about the relationship space. What does Instagram stalking someone before a date have the effect on?
Well, I mean, certainly it sets up an expectation of someone that may not be accurate. If you think about it, it's a representation or a snapshot or their highlight reel, I guess is maybe the best way to look at that. Right. And so what we try to do to get around that is when matches occur, we provide a detailed explanation as to why those matches occurred. We look at areas of strength and compatibility, and then we also look at areas that you really should pay attention to and maybe have a conversation around. And so what we found is that that actually does more towards helping people interact versus going out and trying to discover via Instagram or Snap or whatever it is that they're trying to do. So again, we can't control it, but we definitely try to provide tools to influence people to do it in a more, I guess, productive and useful way.
Another question I have for kind of your idea of the matchmaking service, how much are
Mhm.
pictures involved? Because nowadays the whole dating really to even spark a conversation is that physical attractiveness. On
Right.
your company and on Haven, how many pictures do you see of someone? And is that something to where someone can have a 95% match with someone and then immediately go, well, I don't find them physically attractive?
It certainly can happen, but there's a few things that we try to do to manage against that. Number one, there's two levels at Haven. You can join and see your matches for free, but you don't see the photos of the individual. What you see are the reasons why you matched, why you're compatible. You see all those types of details. And if you decide that you want to connect with that individual, you'll select connect. If both parties connect, then that will open up pictures and you can see pictures from there. So we're trying to get ahead of just that initial chemistry component and really make sure that both parties are looking at this and saying, this looks like somebody that makes sense for me. Now let's take it, a little step further. And that's when photos unlock. So both people have to connect first in order for that to happen.
And I'd love to know too, how is how really you seen the dating realm change in the last 20 years now with social media and dating
Yeah.
apps so prominent? How has it changed in terms of what people look for and how relationships are formed?
That's a good question. I mean, if you think about it just from a digital dating perspective, if you go back to the late 90s, you had Match and eHarmony. Then you move forward into roughly 2012, where Tinder came in and introduced swiping. And now here we are in 2026. And each one of these models, about every 15 years or so, the industry seems to shift. Right now, we're seeing that shift starting to happen again. People are fatigued with swiping. It's become gamification, almost like a slot machine at a casino. And it's producing a fair amount of fatigue for a number of users. We do a lot of research on this, both initially and continuously. We interview a lot of folks. We spend a lot of time talking to people, understanding their interaction and really their view on modern dating, and it's got a lot of people a little bit more jaded. There's really now two options that people see, maybe a third if you're really really serious, but the two would be digital dating or apps, or the old-fashioned way of just meeting somebody organically, waiting for lightning to strike. And then that third option could be hiring a matchmaker or something like that if you want to spend that kind of money to do that. When dating apps fail people, many have just opted out and said, I'll just go the organic route and see if I can meet people the old fashioned way. And that's great. But modern society has made that pretty difficult. A lot of people work from home now, which makes interacting with people more difficult, even if it's on your commute. If you're living in a city, going on trains or walking or whatever it may be. We've seen a reduction in third spaces for people as well. So there's a resurgence in going to meet in different spots outside of your workspace or your living space. And so what we're finding is that technology was never meant to replace the chemistry and interaction that people have. It's really just a tool to help enhance that. And that's really the kind of the principle that we took in building Haven. We wanted to use the technology to make it more efficient, but get it offline and in person as quickly as possible.
And I've always had that conversation with my friends. Like the idea of a dating app sounds perfect. Kind of the same thing as social media. The idea
Right.
of it sounds perfect.
Right.
Why, in retrospect, is it not as efficient as we might think it could be? Because you're pretty much just shopping online.
It's different incentives, right? So from a dating app company perspective, their incentive, if you find your match quickly, they've lost a customer. You have different incentives. So I always say, follow the incentive. At Haven, we'll match you before you spend a dime. So this is not our intent at all. What we're trying to do is make sure that we can provide quality matches. And then if those matches make sense, then you can become a member and go from there. But, um, you know, the intent and the incentive of the provider is really what you need to look at.
Now, shifting toward the topic, and I think this is what we also mentioned in our email, was the episode on the differences between men and women. First, I'd love to know your opinion. Why do dating apps and social media, for that matter, affect the attention of men and women? Women seem to have more attention on social media and typically have more swipe rights and things like that, as opposed to men on
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to human nature a little bit. Women definitely will get a lot more attention. I think that has some cultural elements as well. Men have been taught, raised just in general, the idea of being the pursuer. So reaching out and um, talking to people, engaging, being the first one to take that step. So that's common. And so for men too, on the flip side, a lot of men complain about not getting the right level or the right types of connections online, and particularly in dating. The other thing is if you think about just messaging alone. So from a woman's perspective, if they're getting a lot of volume, a lot of messages, that message may come in on a Tuesday at 1:30 in the afternoon. She might be at work. She
that.
might not see that message because it's buried until Thursday at 6 p.m. From the guy's perspective, it's like maybe she's not interested, maybe, whatever. I mean, a lot of things go through the mind. But in reality, it's just a volume problem in a lot of cases. She might be perfectly interested, but it's just she didn't know that you were going to text her at one something on a Tuesday, and why. So that's why that whole I've got to keep checking and make sure that I stay engaged. That starts to work on the psyche of individuals, particularly guys sometimes as well. And then from a woman's perspective, it's a lot of volume, a lot to manage. It becomes a second job that nobody ever wanted, and it doesn't pay very well. So it starts to get a little bit overwhelming. And that's probably been the two number one things that we have seen in talking to thousands of single individuals that are going through this today.
And now you mentioned that word loneliness, and I think
Yeah.
this goes back to social media, right? We are in an age where people have thousands of followers, 100,000 millions, yet there's a lot of people who end up having very lonelier lives. They don't have as many friends in person, they don't have matches in person and go on dates in person. I'd love to know your opinion on why. Why do you think that is?
Why do I think that people are lonely in this age
Yeah.
of multiple friends online and things like that? It's because it's primarily focused outward and not inward. So if you're really focusing on driving those, uh, I guess, followers or online interactions, it takes your focus away from real world interaction. That's been the main thing that we've seen, and that's why we've pushed so hard for going back to the real world, third spaces, whatever it may be, in real world interaction. But vanity metrics like followers and things like that are great. I think that some people might also have a little bit of intent of trying to monetize that or to have some sort of notoriety that comes from that. And that's great, but it's not a replacement for real world interaction. That's for sure.
Now this is kind of a fun question because right, you use your matchmaking service, everything's great, but we do have the thoughts of not only like we said Instagram stalking, but always having other options available on social media, right? You go through your feed, you see people you may know. In your, I guess, perspective, if you were talking to a friend or somebody you know, what would your advice be to them when they are starting to date somebody with social media? Like, would you tell them to limit their use, or what was your advice on that?
I don't think limiting the use is the right approach. I would steer them towards focusing on shared intent, which is very difficult to understand through social media. So it almost naturally takes you out of social media and back into the real world. It's very difficult to look at a picture or a profile to understand what someone's intent is. And when I say intent, I'm talking about, so for example, you can say, if you think about compatibility and intent, if you're going on a road trip,
Mhm.
and the person that you're on this road trip with, you like the same music, you have the same schedule for restroom stops, you just generally get along well. That's compatibility. But if one of you wants to go to Chicago and the other one wants to go to New York, that's a different intent. And it's harder to understand intent through social media. You have to do that in person and through conversation uh, and interaction. It's not something that you can do through Instagram stalking or anything like that. So I really try to steer people towards trying to ID and understand intent. And then if you then go to chemistry and all those other things after shared intent.
Now, going on that point, right? And I kind of grew up in an age where, seeing so many other people out there online is pretty normal, but throw back to maybe 30, 40 years ago, you don't really have
Mhm.
that comparison or infinite choice problem. How can somebody really stay committed or even want to stay committed in a relationship or dating realm when they can always have that thought of what if somebody's better?
That's a personal thing that they need to figure out before they start entering into a serious dating world, right? I mean, if you're interested in casual dating and looking for the next best thing, that's great, but that's a different motion. If you're looking for something a longer term, something more stable, then certainly you're going to want to approach that very differently. Um, infinite choice is one of those things that doesn't really come up that from our perspective, from what I see with people that are really looking for committed or longer term relationships. Casual is a whole other conversation. So again, it really starts to go back to intent. What are you trying to accomplish in this relationship setup or whatever it is that you're looking for?
Now,
Does that make
you've
sense? You understand?
yes, yes, for sure. And I
Yeah.
also want to get to the point too where you've talked to so many singles and trying to figure out what they want. Is there ever a difference of what they say they want and what they actually want in a relationship?
Almost all the time.
I'd love
Almost
to.
all the
What
time.
are some examples of that? And you don't have to name names, obviously, but like more of just some
Yeah.
patterns or generalizations.
Yeah. So I'd say, long-term relationship is one thing that a lot of people say they want, but when they start peeling the onion back and understanding, well, what does that mean to you? You get a lot of I'm not sures and I don't know. And so what we've tried to do with that is provide some tools. Actually, we have some tools on our website that ask certain questions and guide people through the process to help them identify for themselves what it is that they're actually looking for. Because what they say and then what they do sometimes doesn't match. That's very, very common. Some examples of that. I'm trying to think of a couple that I can share here. Um, well, I would say that monogamy is a good one. That one comes up a lot, particularly lately. Um, there are some people that say that they want ethical non-monogamy, but then they don't know how to define what that means.
Hmm.
And so we really push back and ask them to go back and reconsider what that means to them and why they're looking for that. That's probably one of the biggest areas that we see between monogamy and ethical non-monogamy. and differences there between what people think they want and what they actually demonstrate that they want.
And that also brings me to another point of, you know what a situationship means? That's a big term
Of
nowadays.
course,
I'd love to
of
know first off,
course.
what, I guess, what is a situationship in your terms, and I guess do you have an opinion on what a situationship is, or how it goes with the dating world?
Well, for me, a situationship is something that's not quite committed, but not quite so casual. It's somewhere in between. It's a gray area item, and leaves a lot of room or a lot of leeway for definition. So unless it's really clear, it can mean one thing to one person in a relationship or a situationship and another, something else to the other person. But from my perspective, I don't see that any human interaction or connection is a bad thing as long as both parties understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and they're both on board with that. And so, uh, again, if a long-term relationship or a committed relationship is what somebody's looking for, that's great. That's an intent-based item. Not everybody has that same intent. Some people are absolutely interested in a situationship, a little bit more casual, a little bit more flexible. So I have I think one individual right now who's he's 34 and he's a big sports guy, loves to play sports. Um, and that doesn't leave a lot of time between work life and everything else. So he's one that was interested in more of a situationship type of thing. And that made sense for him.
No, I mean it does. There's just so the dating world, it seems so complex nowadays because we have these newer innovations coming out, but
Mhm.
I think it all does come back to just actually meeting a person and talking to them, and like you said, knowing their intentions and things like that. It's very, very
Knowing
powerful.
your own intentions,
Hmm.
right? Knowing your own
Exactly.
intent.
And trying to find those compatibility. Now for, I guess, a point validation. How much of these, or I guess in your experience, do you find that people are using modern dating apps as a real place to find connection, or is it sometimes like a validation or a game per se?
It's a little bit of both, but definitely the gamification side of it is a big piece. It's entertainment. It's something you can do while you're bored waiting in line for your Starbucks order. It's just naturally become this addictive dopamine spike that people get, and validation is a big reason for that. You know, if you're getting swipe rights and matches and things like that, that makes you feel good. And that's part of that validation cycle. So, but again, back to intent. If that's what your game is and that's what you're looking for, then I would say then keep doing it because you're not really looking for a relationship. You're looking for something else. And if it's providing you that, then good for you. But if you're looking for a real connection, then there's a different way to do that.
Now, for your app specifically, is is it really for people that are looking for long term, or is it really a wide variety of intentions?
Yeah, Haven is an intent-based platform at its core. So we don't define intention. The users define intention. So that can be long-term, casual, friends with benefits. We don't really care. The system is designed to match people based on shared intent first and compatibility second, with an 80% minimum compatibility match. So if you don't have a shared intent or those hard gates, then you won't ever even see each other. There's nothing to browse through. There's no scrolling through people and saying, well, the person looks good, so let me see if I can make this work. You'll never see each other if you don't have shared intent first.
Okay, now I'm gonna kind of start closing this out. I would love to find some more overlap with social media and dating apps. The first one I think of is Snapchat. And the reason why, it's if you're in a relationship or even in a dating stage, you constantly have people that you message or snap with no real meaning, but they're always there. In your opinion, in a relationship, is it important, or does it even matter to talk to other people of the gender you're looking for, or is it something that you would like to see people have less interaction with?
Yeah, so that's a big philosophical question that you're asking. And from my perspective, you hear me say this continuously, but again, it comes down to intent. If your intent is genuine and messaging people because they're your friends or whatever, there's nothing wrong with that from my view. The only issue that you might have is if your partner has a problem with it, then that's something that you should probably discuss with your partner. But if your intent is genuine and pure, then what difference does it make? It's just another human that you're connected with.
Right.
But if you have other intentions that don't align with your relationship, well, that's something you gotta figure out. So no, I don't see that as any problem whatsoever.
Now, for the people that are making a great match and they're starting to find their footing in a relationship, give me some relationship advice you have for people that are actually in a healthy relationship and starting out.
Starting out in a healthy relationship. The biggest thing that I always tell people right out of the gates is communication and listening. It's the biggest thing. You know, as humans, we sometimes share information and we receive and absorb information differently. So sometimes we might feel, well, we've already talked about this, or I told you that, and maybe it didn't land properly, or it didn't just, circumstance was whatever it was, and I didn't hear you. Communicate and listen repeatedly, and save the frustration a little bit and give people a little bit of grace sometimes, because getting to know someone is a mutual two-way street, and we're both trying to both listen and absorb and convey information at the same time. So early stages, I say a little bit of grace, listen a lot, and communicate well. Absolutely.
All right, awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, Rick. I think it's been a very great conversation. Definitely will show up some
Yeah.
links to Haven. But before we sign off, anything else you want to add? Before we
Yes,
finish up here?
yes, thanks for the opportunity to talk. It was a good chat. I loved it.
Yes, and thank you again for reaching out. I love what you're doing. I think it's great that we're finding people with more human connection and actually using our technology for a good purpose, not for, I guess, personal financial gain for a lot of these companies. And it really seems like it's a genuine message out there to help people find their person. And I think that's awesome. Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Rick. And for all you listeners, tune in next week for more social media sobriety.